Welcome to this talk about Snowdrop after Unreal in the Unreal Theater. So my name is Rodrigo Cortes. People usually call me Rode. And I'm going to talk a little bit on the Snowdrop and the philosophies of massive developing games. So it's a little bit of a mix. First of all, why is an art director talking about technology? Why isn't a technical director or any coder talking about the technology? So hopefully I'll explain a little bit of my background, and it will become clearer later. So first of all, I've been working in the industry for 16 years. The last 11, I've been at Massive Entertainment. And these are just some of the titles I've been working on. But actually, my main role at Massive has been R&D for at least 10 of those 11 years. And then from time to time, jump into full production, like, for example, in Ground Control and World in Conflict. And now lately, I went to the dark side, working on brand and marketing. Very interesting. Also, as an R&D guy, some of the games that Massive has been working on, like, for example, Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, started as small R&D projects where we, for example, tested the FPS gameplay. And since we've been an RTS studio, we needed to show Ubisoft that we also understood how to make FPS, for example, and that led to Far Cry. And the same with Assassin's Creed, where we had tools to be able to prototype very quickly. I also worked on getting this school started. And according to ANSE, the best gaming school in Europe, or the world, I don't remember. There's probably as good schools as this one, but I'm pretty happy about this one because the same there was like when you work with a lot of creative people, when you get people from the school, you need to deprogram them normally. And the reason we wanted to cooperate with a school and start something new was that we wanted people to be able, that we could be able to hire directly. And we're in the mindset of production and understood cooperation with coders and so on. So I worked a lot with Nikke Hansson on getting the collaboration going very early on. So my interest with technology started with this awesome piece of Microsoft technology, Notepad. And I was working at Southend at the time. And my boss, Anders Jeppsson, said, like, okay, we need to do this game. It's a lot of animations. So you need to do an animation system. So it's you and another guy and 9 months. And I talked to the coder, and he said, like, okay, how are we going to do this? And it's like, okay, I'm doing AI, I'm doing pathfinding, I'm doing everything. So I can do an animation system, but you won't get a tool. So okay, Notepad then. The interesting thing here is that we were able to do over 1,000 animations, and it was only me doing it, so I had to do all the animations and work on the system, and it needed to run on the Xbox at all times and be very scalable. So we had like I think 150 players, and they all had unique animation sets. So this already started my interest in working in like the philosophy of the tools, and it's not so much about the technology in this case. It's about the thought process behind it. So you are able to iterate, you're able to try things, you're able to do things, and this started as very rough, maybe led us when I was working at Massive to analog. So this was the first version of a game that we are working on right now, when the technology wasn't done. So we went analog, and it's like, okay, we need to show gameplay. How do we show gameplay? So we need to build this diorama, and if people have been at Massive, it's in the entrance still, where we pitch an RPG shooter in urban environments with cover system. And we had like the chief creative officer of Ubisoft was coming to Massive. And it's like, okay, he's coming in 5 days, and we need to show something. And it's like, ah! And I'd never done this before, so we were at the basement at Massive painting this thing, and got approved, which led to this little project, which was the latest R&D became this. Obviously, there was a big process getting to this point. But I'm going to show you a little movie showing what type of game it is, and probably most of you have seen it, but still. So again, a very small project became huge project. I think it's one of the biggest in Sweden right now, at least the biggest massive has ever done. We're lead studio on it. We're working on this technology called Snowdrop to be able to make it, and it's for the next generation of consoles, or the new generation of consoles. Next is before they came, and the PC. So I'm not going to go into much details here. So there are some challenges working on AAA and working on the division, the league where we wanted to be. We wanted to work with the best type of games. At the same time, we're in Malmö, Sweden. And there is a little bit about Malmö, like the fact that we have this conference in Malmö, the fact that there is the tallest building in Scandinavia in Malmö, and the bridge, and it's like the Malmö mentality. We want to do the biggest things, and it's also the Scandinavian thing. And if you saw the presentation about David, it's the same thing. That this is the type of things we want to do. We want to do the biggest, but maybe we don't have the assets to do it. For example, the constraints of just being in Malmö, it's hard to attract talent or scale the company. And we don't want to scale the company. So some of the challenges working on the new gen consoles is obviously more power. They're around 10 times more powerful in certain things, maybe not so much in others, but they're very, very powerful machines. But it actually means that it takes longer. A polygon count of 10,000 per character instead of 2,000 takes longer time to do. There's higher resolution, there's more content, there's larger view distance, and so on. It takes more time. And if you look at the AAA game segment generally, and a lot, especially looking at the last generation of games, and if we take the example of Assassin's Creed, which is like the flagship title of Ubisoft, the first version came very early on in the generation, and it was a big game, but like the last one, for example, Black Flag, you had so many activities, you have the ship thing, and it's like a huge open world, and like so many things you can do. So the scope of the games are becoming huge, budgets are becoming huge, time to make, and the amount of people working on it. You probably heard about GTA, the most expensive project so far, 2 billion, whatever, and 1,000 people working on it, 5 years. So AAA business is getting a little bit dangerous. It's risky to make, and there's less and less games making more and more profit. So it's becoming even more polarized than it was before. We want to be in this space, and we had to work with technology, with art, with design, everything together to be able to make it, obviously. And that was last generation. Who knows what will happen now? Since like I said before, like there is more resources, there is more things to do, and the first batch of games that came were more in a transition period. Now the interesting thing happens with the next generation of games, where it's going to be even more advanced, even more, I guess, more people working on the projects, even longer development times, and even bigger budgets. So our answer, or one of our answers, is Snowdrop. And the difference here compared to maybe other engines is that in our case, it's not so much an engine, but it's more like a philosophy of how to make games. The way we think about games, the way we want to develop games, the size of our studio, all those constraints put together. So the Snowdrop engine is based on 3 main pillars. The first one is doing things better, not bigger. And to do that, you cannot just make an engine that makes more effects and more polygons and more whatever. You need to rethink many of the processes. So it's a 50-50 process and technology. So we needed to go back to the drawing board on how we create games, how we think about games. And since I've been working a lot on R&D, the very early things we did is that this R&D engine developed to become this big production engine. And it has to work on both ways. So it's easy to develop, easy to try things, easy to share whatever work you're doing, and it needs to be instant. We do it also by empowering the content creators. We give a lot of freedom to all the animators, the artists, the designers, to do whatever they want or need to do. So the tool shouldn't stop you. As the same as Notepad. Notepad, there is no stop. You decide whatever is going to be there. It's the same thing here. It's like you shouldn't be put in a production pipeline, so to speak. You should be able to get empowered by your tool. You're thinking of something, and it's like, oh, I want to try this, and then you should just be able to do it, hopefully without the help of programmers. So you have the tools just supporting you. And this is also another thing. It's like, especially in our case, where we want to be in the AAA segment, but we have massive. It's a big studio, but it's not huge. It's 300 people, and we have several projects. So it's not only one. And then we also want to do one of the biggest game worlds ever created and be in the AAA segment. So we needed to be able to produce more things with less people, more assets with less time, better graphics, faster workflow. From the game perspective, the Division itself is it's a beautiful world. It's a strong IP, an ownable universe, and the whole premise is that you are in New York in mid-crisis. So one of the biggest things we started with was like get immersion was the key driver for us. It's like you need to be immersed in this world to be able to fully experience it. And especially in open world games, sometimes immersion hasn't been the highest value. It's more about having fun and exploring, but it's very hard to get immersed. So we worked very, very hard on immersion, and that leads on everything. UI, the lighting engine, the effects, everything goes back to immersion. So the first of all, immersion is extreme attention to detail. And it's a mix of like massive how we are, and I don't know, we're a little crazy, I think. Like for example, in this case, probably nobody saw it. I'm pretty sure nobody saw it. That the guy gets snow in his shoulders when he's outside, and when he goes inside, it melts. Nobody has ever seen that. But then somebody thought that was important and put it in the game. And there are like 1,000 of these small details, but all the details build up an image, and you get immersed just by seeing all of these small things that later become bigger. The second thing, in our case, oops, is the open world. We needed to be able to do a world that is free to explore. It's not linear. It's not a map. It's just an open world. And the vastness of it, especially being based in New York, is that it's not just terrain. It's very high detailed content everywhere. You cannot go to any part of New York and there is like, let's have this valley here that is cheap to do. And also normally you need to pick. You do a very detailed game which has maps and is based on corridor or smaller segments, or you do an open world and you lower the fidelity. And of course, we wanted both. Another thing that we needed to have, it's doing a very dynamic universe. It needed to feel alive. The city needed to feel like it was alive, like it was breathing almost. We have the night cycle, which means that we needed to have dynamic light. We couldn't bake anything. And we have weather systems that are dynamic. Things happen all the time dynamically. So it needed to support all of this. And on the last point, it's and this is a GIF that was in Reddit, I think, where we're the highest Reddit that day, when somebody saw the closing door. And for us, it was a small detail, but that later became a big thing where people were talking about like almost like the big moment of last E3. a door being closed, and it feels almost stupid. It's like there was another game, I won't say which, where there was a building collapsing, and then there was like a closing door, and that got more press. But the thing is, it's not about the closing door. It's about all the details that makes the world feel alive for you. And you've probably been like me, where you're playing a game and you feel like you're running around in this shell. You're like a box. Even I see the character is very detailed and it's all cool, but you feel like you are like this vessel in a shell. And you shoot a car and it explodes. Obviously, normally that doesn't happen. But for the first time, we're getting details and effects on the player where it's adding up. All the little parts are adding up. And we wanted to do... So I'm not going to show this. So you're going crazy. So I'm going to show 6 examples of the engine and how it connects to our 3 pillars and the requirements of the game and immersion. So the first one is lighting. To me, the most important, because with correct lighting, you start believing the world, you start immersing yourself in the world. And you can have a very undetailed scene, very few polygons, very simple textures, but with proper lighting, you start believing it. So the system we made is light probe based, and for you that don't know kind of what light probe means, it's very similar to in the movie industry, where they use a gray sphere and a chrome sphere, and they put it when they shoot something in live, and then they can do replacements of 3D objects based on the information that the sphere gives you. And you probably see it in the behind the scenes of Star Wars and Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever. There's always a guy running around with the sticks and the spheres. So it's a similar system, but it allowed us to do the lighting, a global illumination lighting in real time on large scale. So you get, and this is a Cornell box, which is used like 30 years ago. They started to use it to be able to mimic indirect light and how light bleed works. Like, for example, on the left side, you get the light bleed on the sphere that becomes red, and on the right side, you get the green light bleed. So this is what we wanted to do, and this is what we wanted to achieve. So our coders gave us this light system, which is really nice, with the requirements we had. And again, we never said in the beginning that Snowdrop is going to be the most beautiful engine or the best lighting. It's just that we needed, with the requirements of the game and the requirements and the constraints we had, is that this is the system we wanted to do. And because of the simplicity of it, they just went ahead and did a very quick version of the lighting, which is a little bit based on the work we did on Far Cry, on the light probes, but enhanced, obviously. We needed to do large-scale open world, day-night cycle. So in the beginning, you'll probably see the effects of the real-time on a day-night cycle. Then later, you're going to see an indoor scene where you get the real-time light bleed and illumination, and also how it affects all the particle effects we have. All the effects are using the same system for the indirect light. So I'm going to shut up now. you have the lighting, but then the next big part is the surfaces. Something that, like, at least to me, I don't know of you guys, but comes to mind on the last generation is plastic. Plastic was, like, the characters looked plasticky, the world felt plasticky, and there were many techniques to try to mimic real-world materials, but they were always based on maps, which is like the diffuse map, the texture, the specular map, the bump map, or the normal map. Try to approximate this. On this engine, we went, and this is a buzzword everywhere, with physically based shading, which is actually a collection of techniques to be able to mimic real-world material mathematically. So the very first thing we did is that we took, I think it was Modo, and did a couple of materials and rendered them, and then tried to mimic them in the engine for every part. And I'm not sure which one is which. One of those is Modo, and one of those is Snowdrop. And that was the beginning, and obviously we expanded a lot this system. Again, going back to immersion, because you shouldn't even think about materials. You're just running around in this world, but all the impressions are coming back to you when you experience it. So in the movie, I'm going to show you the helicopter scene has, for example, a lot of different plastics. On the right, there is the hard plastics. There is like transparent plastics, or like almost foil kind of thing. There is the tarp in the background, the metals of the helicopter, and all materials react realistically to the light conditions that it's given. The same in the indoor scene. You get a lot of work on reflection, specular, and the interaction of light and how it moves. Very important to get the correct feel on every scene. On top of this, we had the dynamic weather. So the shader system needed to react real time to weather changes. And we have this very iconic look on the snow, which is a little bit of like a wet, melted snow. So again, the tech guys worked on a shader that is generally works everywhere, on every other shader on top of it, where you can decide the amount of snow you get. So again, I'm gonna play it. Stupid computer. So we have the light, we have the materials. Now some fool decided to make this place. It wasn't me. New York, and obviously in the beginning it's like, of course, this is the coolest place to be in a mid-crisis situation. But when you start really looking at it, it's like the amount of detail, the amount of buildings, the amount of streets, the amount of everything is overwhelming. And again, we have the constraints of Massive. We are 175 people at Massive working on this. It's a huge project. It's still not 1,000 like GTA. And we wanted a bigger world, one of the biggest worlds ever created in game worlds, and at the highest detail. So obviously, again, we needed to go back to Snowdrop to give us a tool that was able to allow us to produce this with few people, very high quality content, a lot of content. So you're going to see our building system, which was a very simple requirements. And again, it's like I'm not the tech guy. I only told the guys, it's like I want to be able to select an area where there's going to be a building. I want it to be like Lego, where I do different pieces. And then later, if I feel like changing the height or width or base, I can do that. So luckily, they gave us. And at the end, you're going to see some variation of those buildings. And much of this footage is a little bit old. I'm not sure. We're going to show a little bit more at E3 So you're gonna soon, in 2-3 weeks, see a lot more. But it still gives you a lot of variety just being in the Brooklyn area. You have the lighting, you have the materials, you have all the buildings, but then obviously it's New York, or actually any city. It's a lot of details, a lot of cars, a lot of everything. Again, very overwhelming. So how are you going to produce a lot of content without actually having to produce every piece of content? We had to go back to, again, not the drawing board, but this is actually a very core function of Snowdrop. This is actually the function of Snowdrop, which is to produce content that is very modifiable. And it's done by an artist normally. It's not done by the coders. So we have something called asset communication. And in this case, for example, we have the first one is you're going to see a helicopter, and the whole scene is set up by an artist, where you can decide how much rust there is in the helicopter, if it's different camos or different whatever, if it's landed, if it's hovering, if it's flying, and everything is set up by him. And the same with the cars. Back in the day, probably not so much lately, if you wanted a different type of car, you needed a different texture. If you wanted a burnt car, that's another car. If you wanted a car that has snow, you have the car with snow, whatever. And now you have one car, and then you can do everything with it, because it's a very interconnected system that is set up. So when the level designer gets it, he can decide himself if it's going to be a burnt car or not, or if it's going to be a red one or a sports car, based on one prop. And at the end we show this bridge sequence, which has a lot of variety and a lot of detail and a lot of fidelity, but actually based on very few props. There is not a lot of props, it's just that the variation you get from it. With epic music, everything's cooler. Yeah, you have all of these details, you have all of the world, but like I said before, normally this could be achieved everywhere else, but we wanted to be able to feel alive. Much of the game is about combat and shooting, shooting guns. So we wanted to have a very visceral experience when you're experiencing the world, and one of the things is destruction. So again, power of Snowdrop is actually two guys. We told them we want destruction in the game. Can you do that? And preferably if it's different type of destruction. And then they went away for a couple of weeks, and then they came back with the beginning to what is now one of the most advanced destruction systems out there. But again, because we gave them the power to decide on what they wanted to do. So our destruction system is real-time. Nothing is pre-calculated. And for every material, you get different response on the shattering, the destruction, and it's a mix of particles and real-time Boolean operations. not the coder, so don't ask me the exact details of this. But it's just cool. And when you're experiencing the world and we are in combat and you're shooting, it's quite amazing. And again, at E3, you're going to see much more. So lastly, this is the first time we show the UI system. It comes back to two things. First is that we wanted to have something that is immersive. The UI didn't come from like, we want a cool UI. It came from like, we want to immerse the player, and we hate this 2D layer that is stopping me from seeing the game. It's an immersion breaker. I want the UI to be in the world. And obviously, Minority Report was a big inspiration, since we have people interacting with the interface in real time and it's surrounding them. So I'm going to show some examples of the UI. And again, everything is integrated. There is no middleware, there's nothing. You don't go outside of the engine. It's inside of the engine, and you can interact with every UI part. So in the beginning, I'm going to show you this tunnel piece of UI for entering special areas in the game, where anytime you in the game you can just pause the game and fly everywhere and interact with it. The second part is going to be on the top right. It's going to be on the this is a very simple UI thing, but you can probably extrapolate to how powerful it is when you can interact with it and see all the effects directly. And then the last part is going to be on the mega map that we showed at E3, where a lot of people were like, yeah, sure, that's After Effects, of course. And no, it's not. It's actually the real map. And I'm going to show you a little bit on like when one of the features that we haven't shown before is that you can actually fly in the map mode everywhere. So it is a real map. It is actually functioning. And then this is obviously taken from the editor that I just did yesterday. But again, at E3, you're probably going to see it better. Why do I have the worst computer ever? So that was the last part I was going to show. The interesting thing about Snowdrop is that, at least to me, all the different parts of the game looks amazing. And it doesn't matter if you go to the UI or the AI or the animation system or the lighting system. Never was it said that we're going to have the best of any of those. And I think we have almost the best in every part. And it's not a coincidence that this happens. It's because the system was built in such a way. And Snowdrop is built on the foundation of that we're empowering the content creators. So when you give any part of the engine to anyone, it's like, okay, can you do this? And then you don't have to set up, you don't have to define anything. They just run away with it. And as you saw, probably many of the editors, everything is integrated. So everything has the same node system, the same color pickers. There is nothing going outside of the engine. Game and editor are the same. So you get a lot of these really nice side effects, almost. So even though you might not believe me, the good graphics, the animation, everything is good side effects of a very, very strong tool set. And if you go to the philosophy that we have the better, not bigger, empowering the content creator, and doing more with less, it's actually applicable to all the things that we do with Snowdrop and at Massive. And also, with the going back to the game, where immersion was very, very important for us, it led us to all the decisions that we have in the division right now. So thank you very much. Hope you liked the presentation. Are we going to have a Q&A? Yes? So if you have any questions, you can just ask. Anybody has questions?
Do you have any more info how those spheres work? Like
The spheres?
You could see the spheres in the scene. Is that the lighting spheres?
Yes. So again, I'm not the coder, so probably I won't give you the best answer. But it's based on a similar system that was used in Far Cry, and I think there is a paper on it on GDC Vault. The difference here is that we have the capability to produce way more. The fidelity is very high. It's, I think, within the meter. And it's so there is no work for the content creator. It's generated on the street level and then up on the buildings, and it uses the building system to know where the building is. Then it's updated, I think, on the GPU in real time. So you get, when you're moving around in the world or the time of day changing, the whole world is being rebuilt at all times. More than that, I probably can't say, and I probably can't help you since I didn't code it.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I need. Other questions? Over there?
Can you tell us something about the behavior? How how are they designed for the non-player characters?
The cool thing is, like, as you saw in the notes, for shaders or for UI or for everything, it's the same system. So the behaviors are done that and I don't want to go into details because probably somebody's gonna kill me. But it uses the same behavior, which is like giving them intentions, and you have like a list of intentions that they can do, and you can connect it to different archetypes of enemies, where they can be, like, for example, they have an ability that they, if somebody runs to their cover, they will run away, and then that's an ability, or they react smartly to different skills and so on. But it's again, it's using the exact same node-based system for the behaviors. Over here.
Do the content creators create the faces of the building, or do they come from some magical place?
No. So all the Lego pieces are created by an artist, and it's more that we take a look at the type of buildings, like different type of architecture and style, and then we choose the areas we want. Like we part the building in different, like the entrances, the windows, the corners, the tops, if there is like just a brick wall, or if it's a modern type of building, if there is a storefront and so on, and do all the pieces. And then when they go into the system, it can be upgraded. So you might start with only one type of building, with, let's say, 10 pieces of Lego. And then, since it's scalable, all of a sudden you have 5 more pieces, because somebody requested. They were building, and it's like, I'm actually missing a balcony. It would be great with a balcony. And then somebody does a balcony, and it comes in, and you can start putting balconies wherever you want. Or I would like to have a variation of the color. And then it's a collaboration between the artist and the level designer working on it.
So I was actually going to ask you the same question about the Lego pieces, but did you draw any inspiration from other, like, dynamic building creation tools? And my second part of that is, are you going to use, because it looks really powerful, are you going to use that tool for, you know, other things like city planning and that sort of thing?
I don't want to go into details on future plans or projects, But yes, the system, we're very inspired by obviously stuff going on everywhere, but also a lot on offline tools. Like Houdini is a big inspiration of how they work with their thing, how you set up the effects, how you set up flows, and so on. But most of it comes from the requirements. We're like, I'm like a dummy. I'm like I want this. It needs to be able to do this, or it needs to look this way. And then there are smart people taking it from there.
I have a question of the actual development of this tool. What sort of communication do you have between the designers and the programmers?
You mean workflow-wise, or you mean?
Yeah, because I suppose this wasn't done in a night. So how was how did the process look like?
So this is coming back to a little bit how we work at Massive, and there's like a lot of connections with everyone. People sit together and they form groups. Like for example, like I said before, the instruction was like, okay, we need a technical artist and a programmer, and then they together just go and start. And or like the behavior system, we put a game designer, and it's like, what do you want to have? And then we put a tools guy or a coder, and then they together. So it's based, almost every decision and every feature we have starts with an idea of what do we want to do. And then they together. There is no big design document or technical document specifying everything. And it's like, okay, now we're at item 25, so now 26 means so it's more like what the game needs. And since the game is always playable, and we started very, very early on and just grew the game from there, it's what's in the next sprint. What do we want to focus on now? Okay, we want network to work with whatever, and then like a group goes and just does it.
So it's completely agile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was like a massive form of agile, which is a little bit different. We're not following the whole methodology, but we use a lot of the sprints and the backlog and all of that.
Okay, thank you.
How true is your model of New York to the real New York? Would someone who lives in New York recognize themselves, or is it completely made up?
We showed it to New Yorkers, and they are very happy with it. Obviously, for us, the most important thing is that it's fun, and it's so if there are gonna be compromises both legally and gameplay-wise, and just if it's fun or not. So those will always come before real-world things. So it needs to play good and be fun and have good performance more than it needs to be 100% accurate. But it's fairly accurate, and like I said before, it's like New Yorkers were surprised when they're walking around the game. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.